Okay, continuing with my analysis of William Irwin Thompson's Values and Conflict Through History, fourth chapter of At the Edge of History, his second book. Continuing in this segment, we want to go into the four modes of consciousness, the four modes of Freudian, Jungian consciousness that will describe the four political value orientations. Okay, in the last segment we went over politics in contemporary society, and we discussed how conservatives, liberals, radicals, and reactionaries, where they fall in this circular germplasm of that was originally the tribe, and what things they share, what types of values and so on that those groups share. And what we're going to do here is discuss the same thing using a set of different labels, and we're going to discuss more what are the modes of consciousness that cause these value orientations to take place. So what I do here is I'm giving you again the basic four-way, a circle four-way germplasm, and I put reactionary, conservative, liberal, and radical in there rather than what the what these things would be tagged in the various types of civilizations. So I'm just putting the four political value orientations in here, and we're going to discuss the four modes of consciousness. So what the four modes of consciousness are, as will be labeled in red, and they are more or less aligned with the four political value orientations. They are thanatos, agape, logos, and eros, and we'll describe this a little bit. Thanatos is basically used to describe thanatos is a term that it's basically the opposite of eros. Eros being the part of our consciousness that is dealing with the larger the larger sort of female Dionysian reality that we grow out of, that we then have our brain, that it's our biology coming to think about things. Okay, eros is the area of our mentality that is lost in the sexual realm. Thanatos is the opposite of that. Thanatos is a kind of chaos without sexuality. It is it's feeling stuck in a mode that you cannot escape. Agape is, again, agape is linked with conservatism. Agape is a mode of wanting to not necessarily escape, not just escape psychologically, but escape physically out of the world of thanatos by bringing a sense of order and governing of our social society. In liberal, we have the mode of consciousness called logos. Okay, that logos is largely tied to a liberal political value orientation. Logos, we know what that means, right? It's sort of like, instead of agape, it's more like saying, well, we turn to reason. Rather than just saying we want to order this for the sake of ordering it, we're saying, well, we want things to be more orderly, but we want it to be reasoned. We're ordering things for a reason. We have to keep explaining our reasons for this. And then finally, in the radical political value orientation, that is linked with the mode of consciousness called eros, which we had already talked about. So agape and logos are sort of opposed to one another in the way that liberals and conservatives are opposed to one another, and eros and thanatos are modes of consciousness that are opposed to each other in the way that radicals and reactionaries are opposed to one another. Okay, here what I'm going to do is I'm showing you the perpendicular modes of consciousness rather than the the diagonal modes of consciousness. Logos, agape, eros, and thanatos are diagonal-based oppositions, and here what I'm showing you is sort of what could be called the end result of the sharings. Remember when I showed you between liberals, conservatives, between liberals and radicals, and so on. When I exploded this circle out, I showed you what the sharings were between groups. Well, these four labels, charisma, routine, ontos, and chaos, are the actual resultant modes of consciousness that come from the sharing between groups. So let me explain that a little. Obviously, you can see from charisma and routine, you can see that left-right orientation that I showed you in many slides past. You know, when I showed you that the left side of all of this diagramming is the charismatic ideational side, and that the right side is the routine operational side. So that becomes clear. That the modes of agape and thanatos, or conservative and reactionary, when they come together for a sharing of ideals, that turns into routine. You get the mode of consciousness of pure routine in life. When liberals and radicals come together for their sharing, or the sharing of logos and eros, you get charisma. You get the realm of pure charisma, a mode of consciousness of charisma. Now the upper, so that's left and right, but now we have an upper and lower modes of consciousness that happen. Now when liberals and conservatives come together to share, this is the same thing as the sharing between logos and agape. The result is ontos. Now ontos is supposed to be, by that we're sort of saying the pinnacle of having achieved some sort of wisdom. It's the opposite of chaos. Ontos is the opposite of chaos. Whatever chaos is, ontos is the exact opposite. Between radical and reactionary, you get, when their sharings come together, which remember we said that was a belief in force, the result is chaos. In other words, or when eros and thanatos are at odds with each other. Okay, so what this is really saying is that when there is a sharing between two of these blue groups, it creates, you have the sharing, but you also have, it creates an oppositional effect between the red objects on here, the red terms, logos and agape. So when liberal and conservative come together to share something and agree on it, you get ontos, but what you get is a conflict between logos and agape. When eros and thanatos are at odds with each other, it means that radicals and reactionaries have come together to agree on something. So, you know, it's an interesting dynamic here, and I guess I'll have to go back to Thompson to get a little more. We're going to talk a little more about this because there's only so much that I can explain. He explains it so much better. So let's go to the book. Let me try to find a good point where he talks about, all right, talks about this modes of consciousness thing. Okay. The four quadrants are distinctly opposed to one another, but at the interfaces between opposing quadrants there are ideological sharings which simultaneously create forms of social stability and forms of social change. Because the conservatives and liberals affirm the value of our technological culture, they create a stable situation in which the liberal technocrats in the universities are associated with the industrialists in the government. But the very fact that the liberals live in the universities exposes them to the new non-industrial informational culture. People who work in the media or in the professions are more visibly hip than the industrial conservatives. They are, all right, he goes on to say something here which is quite dated, so I'll just move on. Industrial culture stresses sobriety, paternal wisdom, caution, thrift, and the postponement of sensuous gratification in order to achieve long-term financial prosperity, all amounting to the familiar work ethic. Informational culture stresses joy, youthful spontaneity, energy, abandon, and the postponement of financial security in order to achieve immediate, sensuous self-realization. Industrial culture is one of sexual repression, which finds its outlet in the power of mechanization. In the case of the wealthy industrialist, this power is sublimated into the acceptable forms of a man who dominates factories and financial empires. In the case of a member of the industrial working class, the power is seen in his car, motorcycle, or in going to war, his gunmanship. Industrial and informational cultures met head-on at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago in 1968, and the result is history. The members of informational culture attacked through eros, and the members of industrial culture attacked through thanatos. So, and he'll go on to describe this a little. The liberated young girls in miniskirts and no-bra t-shirts shouted "fuck" to the police, therefore mocking their lower-class station in life, in which women were not permitted to swear, and made fun of their dumb cop Irish Catholic background. Enfolded in the arms of long-haired boys, the young girls would approach the line of National Guard troops and softly ask, "Wouldn't you rather hold me than that gun?" In this form of class war, a college girl made fun of a lower middle-class man who could never expect to pal around with her kind. The power of sex overcame the radicals' smallness in numbers, and the erotically provoked police exploded into a riot. Out came the phallic clubs, and the mini skirts were left, according to the photographs, falling in the opposite direction on the deliberately rough-handled girls. The industrial class had attacked the informational class before, but never had the bitter gulf between opposite ends been so clearly marked as in this mythopoetic battle between Eros and Thanatos. Okay, so you can see that, where you can see that chaos happens where Eros and Thanatos are in conflict. Ontos happens where Logos and Agape are in conflict, but where liberals and conservatives are conspiring to make them be in conflict for this ontos, for a rising up of what you could call, governmental educational power over the masses. All right, I hope that makes sense. What I'd like to do in my final one or two videos on this series is to go into Thompson's discussion on what is possible after the Industrial Revolution. He talked about something called a planetary scientific culture, all right, and he then creates new outgrowths, basically a fourth outgrowth beyond, government, education, and so on, beyond the industrial culture. Okay.